Is Gonzaga elite, or will UConn handle them like they have in recent history? You're locked on.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, just want to say thank you to everyone that's subscribing, that's following the show on audio, YouTube, Transistor Radio. It's all helping. We're proud to bring this great content to people who deserve it. And we're proud to say we're the only podcast that covers both the men's and women's basketball, the absolute basketball capital of the world, Storrs, Connecticut. And we're thrilled to bring you that coverage because it's what you deserve. So to show our gratitude, we're donating 10% back to the community and our revenue to Husky Ticket Project, helping send underserved kids to UConn games, basketball games, football games, baseball games, whatever they want to go to, you name it. We help in facilitating that. We also make a monthly donation to Bleeding Blue for Good, supporting our NIL initiatives at UConn that make a difference. If you're enjoying the show, take a moment to subscribe, follow, leave a review, even if it's a negative one. It all helps. In any engagement is good engagement. Just be respectful. Keep it about basketball. Keep it about the sport. Thanks again for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers place a $5 bet and get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com to get started. Okay. I posed this question in the open. Is Gonzaga elite, or are we going to handle them like we usually do? Here's this matchup between UConn and Gonzaga, number 18 versus number 8. We're going to talk about the rankings later in the program. It's one of the marquee games of the early season slate and offers really a chance for both teams to make a statement. On the Gonzaga side, UConn has been kind of their bugaboo lately, where they can't beat a UConn team, and they've gotten embarrassed and destroyed in games, most recently in the Elite Eight, with Gonzaga getting crushed by the 2023 National Championship team. And then again last year in Seattle, kind of in their semi-home floor, beating them by double digits. I think it was a 13-point game there. It's also for an opportunity for UConn to reestablish itself after this recent resurgence, after the Maui debacle, and keep this sustainable. But again, maybe conversely for Gonzaga, this game is another platform showcase that are they a deserving rank number one on EvanMiya.com and validate why their metrics continue to show that elite status as one of the most efficient and dominant teams in college basketball. But let's talk about Gonzaga first. Our old buddy EvanMiya has them number one, as the number one team in the country, and that's based solely on a key metric that he created called BPR, Bayesian Performance Rating. For those unfamiliar, BPR is an advanced metric that combines a player's impact on both sides of the floor. It breaks down the offensive performance rating and the defensive performance rating, giving a holistic view of the player's contribution to winning, not just their stats, not just their rebounds, points, etc. It kind of adds everything together and gives a good idea of how good the team is. Ryan Nembhard is their star point guard. He leads the country with a BPR of 6.74, and Gonzaga's depth is clear with players like Braden Huff, Graham Ike, and Khalif Bell all ranking highly in BPR. Their team reminds me, if you take out the Donovan Clingan BPR, which was crazy through the roof, of what UConn had last year, where they had like 6 of the top 50 most impactful players in college basketball. I think they have something like 4 of the top 50. So let's talk about how fans can dive deeper into this. Like, if this is like foreign to you, I saw one on my YouTube channel was like, what's KenPom or what's EvanMiya? They're advanced stats. It's not just like I scored 20 points and have 10 rebounds. Like those are great stats, but how do you affect winning? And it's broken down not just that on what teams do well, but how they match up against each other. KenPom, for example, has Gonzaga ranked 4th overall with an elite offensive rating, 2nd in the nation, and a solid defensive rating at 21st, whereas UConn, meanwhile, sits at 12th, showing that their recent turnaround is statistically backed by improvements on both sides of the ball. And it really goes to show you, like, if you look at KenPom right now, UConn last year was the number one offense in the country, according to KenPom, and was top 5 defensively, 5th or 6th. This year, Connecticut's offense is still there at number 3, third-ranked offensive team in the country, according to KenPom, in terms of efficiency. Defense, we're starting to resemble more of Alabama than we are a Dan Hurley coach team. We're 92nd in defensive efficiency right now. Now, it was way higher than that, so it's coming down a little bit. So we're going to get into some better numbers. It does not help that we're playing Gonzaga, who is number 2 offensively efficiency rating, but is also ranked in the 20s in terms of defense, so the 21st ranked defense according to KenPom. So all of these, what does all this matter, right? When you jump the ball up, who kind of puts the ball in the hole and who doesn't? This is a predictive nature of how you can kind of understand if Gonzaga comes out and really dominates UConn. It's not because of UConn isn't trying or they're not doing what they're supposed to do. It's because their defense has been pretty terrible. Now, we saw a much better a version of UConn against Texas. So which team will show up, right? So how to use these metrics to understand the game, right? Look at the tendencies and the styles of play. Gonzaga thrives on efficient offense driven by Nebhart's playmaking and Ike's scoring inside, whereas UConn, on the other hand, has a balanced attack and defensive versatility, albeit a little bit lacking this year. They can make life difficult for even the best offenses when they're clicking like they did against Texas. The key for UConn will be staying out of the foul trouble while finding ways to neutralize Nebhart's influence on the game. And let's not forget the stakes here. UConn, we've already talked about it, has already beaten Gonzaga twice in the past few years. Once in last season, the lead 8, 82-54. 2 seasons ago, pardon me. And again, in Seattle earlier this year. Guys, I'm so sorry for yawning. I haven't been doing it lately, but I've been getting zero sleep and trying to grind out episodes and bring you the content you deserve. So apologize for that. I'll do my best to continue to not be the yawning podcaster, as the Boneyard has called me in the past. But nonetheless, for UConn, this is a chance to prove they're back on track after a rough stretch in Maui and really kind of put the naysayers to sleep. Dan had a quote about saying the people who buried us might have done that prematurely. He's like, I don't know. I think what people love to do with these quotes, and I don't begrudge anyone from throwing these quotes out there, because if he didn't want them out there, he wouldn't say it to the media. They take it and twist it in a way, and they don't do it on purpose. What they do is they allow the rest of us, both pro UConn and haters of UConn, to then get into arguments on their page, and that engagement starts to kind of snowball and snowball and snowball. I know how it works. It happens on my page. It happens on Fox Sports, et cetera, et cetera. So when Dan puts out something and Fox runs with it, it has that kind of advanced effect, if you will, right? So the big question for UConn is whether this recent momentum will carry over into this game. Can they keep Graham Ike from dominating the paint? He's a 15-7 guy right now. Pardon me. Can they disrupt Andrew Nebhart's rhythm as a facilitator? Their shooting guard, I can't think of his name off the top of my head. I had it written in my notes. They're surprisingly not as good a three-point shooting team as you would expect from a Gonzaga team. But as I'm looking at their, I want to get this guy's name because he's a good shooter and he's a really big part of what they do. It's not Ben Gregg. Braden Huff's a good player. Khalif Battle is a good player. But Nolan Hickman, sorry. The one thing I will say about this team is that when you look at their, how big they are, they're big down low. Ben Gregg, Braden Huff, Graham Ike, all 6'10-ish. Ike 6'9", but Nolan Hickman's a 6'2" guard. He's 190 pounds soaking wet. Then you have Ryan Nebhart, 6 foot, 180 pounds. We actually match up well against Gonzaga in terms of size. So I think what you'll see is, as long as we can stay in front of their guards, I feel comfortable with this matchup. Steele Venters is a guy who's a redshirt junior who could be an X factor. Same with Michael Ajaya. Both are 6'7", 220 pounds. But if we go to their page on ESPN, I'm almost positive when I looked it up that those guys don't play a ton. And I haven't watched a ton of Gonzaga except for when they lost to West Virginia. And I don't believe those guys got a lot of run. But let's double check. Let's go to their stats. Ajayi gets about 20 minutes a game. Yeah, they're going to play. But Steele Venters doesn't play, and he's a big dude. But it's really Ajayi. I wonder if Steele's hurt. I would imagine that's the case. Or he transferred. That's maybe not accurate on their website. Either way, this team has Graham Ike, 15.5 points per game. Khalif Battle, 13.4 points. Braden Huff at 12 points a game. Nolan Hickman at 11. Ryan Nemhart and Brian Gregg at 10 points apiece. And they're good. They're a good, solid team. Nemhart's averaging 10 assists a game. So, look, I think if you can limit their three-point shooting, because they don't do it at a high clip, maybe if they shoot a lot of threes and don't make them, we're off to the races. But I think we really just have to be on our toes and look for this as a opportunity to really re-solidify ourselves as a top 10 team in the country. When we return, let's talk about UConn, a 6 seed. Come on, man. What are we doing here? Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. You get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, that's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more. And FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, you're back on Locked On UConn. We just went over Gonzaga and all the fun advanced metrics that are involved in today's college basketball. Go check those sites out, EvanMiya.com, KenPom.com. But is the disrespect or motivation when Joe Lunardi has us as a 6 seed? I know it's early and we don't have the greatest wins of all time. But at some point, you do have to put some volition into stuff that Dan Hurley has said. And what I will say is he has talked about how back in the day, and I know times have changed. I know I'm old. I get it. But back in the day, things like championship pedigree mattered. You talked about players like Alex Karaman versus like AJ DeBonsa, who just signed for $7 million of NIL money from BYU. You talked about players like Hassan Diarra, who's going for a third straight national championship. You talked about coaches like Dan Hurley in this staff, and not that I want them to go anywhere, but Kamani Young and Luke Murray would have easily been snapped up by a high major program to run their programs the way they run the organization that is known as the two-time reigning national champion UConn Huskies. But we don't do that. We have this weird society now where in early discussions, it's like, oh, well, UConn, because they faltered early in the year, is a 6 seed. Really? Let's call it what it is. It's media gymnastics at this point. The same people who tout metrics when it suits their narrative are now conveniently ignoring them to downplay the Huskies. But they're also doing it because UConn has never gotten the respect it deserves as forget about being a blue blood, as being the premier basketball program of the last 25 years. Because we're above those programs. You can be in my mentions and say, you guys will never be a blue blood. That's fine. I'm okay with the distinction of not being a blue blood because I don't care what Coach K says. That argument to me is silly. It means something totally different. It means something about a history of excellence for not even excellence, just a history of elitism. Because we talked about what the term blue blood came from, and it had to do with a lot with olden times, the Gilded Age, and all this other stuff. It's stupid. It's a dumb title, and I don't want it. But what I won't adhere to is when people say this is a lucky run, or this team doesn't is not considered one of the better teams in the country because the only history is new history. It's like, why would you want old history? I want to be a part of all of the UConn championships before I die. After I'm dead and gone, I hope there's a storied history of UConn basketball once I'm buried in the ground. But until then, I want to celebrate some more championships, and I've seen 6. It's great. UConn is in the Big East right now, and even though the Big East has been faulty this year, they're still the 4th-ranked conference in the country. They haven't played anybody in the Big East. Xavier's number 6 in the country. We're 18th. The idea that we wouldn't at least be a 3 or 4 seed right now is stupid. It's a farce. And I know things will change if and when we beat Gonzaga on Saturday. But you can't take these guys seriously. Our fan base is targeted because they target us. The Field of 68 with Jeff Goodman and Douster and Hummel and all those guys. I truly believe, and I made a little video that I'll probably put out later, that the Jeff Goodmans of the world, the Joe Lenardis, they pretend to like guys like Dan Hurley to get access. And then when things go poorly, they peel back that, hey, man, we love you. You're great. We'd love to have a conversation with you too. This guy is laughable. He's disrespectful, et cetera, et cetera. And they tear that person down, because then what that does is that gives them clout that people are going to come on their site and say, what's Goodman going to say next about Dan Hurley? What's he going to say next? Is he going to rank UConn? Is he not? So it's a bit. It's become a bit, and that's fine. And here's the thing. I don't think Jeff Goodman is a bad analyst. I think he's made some bad takes, like the Indiana take, but who hasn't made crappy takes? Like I said that UConn was going to dominate Memphis, 17-point win. How stupid did I look? 100%. The difference though is, I don't care if I have 10 followers or 600,000 followers. I'm going to own it. I'm going to own my stupidity just as much as I'm going to take victory laps. And UConn as a 6 seed right now, even if it makes sense from the metrics perspective, is just a disrespectful clickbait. And I fell for it. So congratulations. You got me to look at it, and we're talking about it on the show. I don't think UConn will likely be a 1 seed this year unless they go on one of these rare, like, rip off a bunch of wins in a row to get them back in the top 5. And I think the Big East is down. So I think the quad 1 opportunities are few and far between going forward. Probably have one with, have a couple with Marquette, a couple with Xavier, if Xavier can hang on, because they look shaky lately. Providence looks like crap. St. John's will be 2 quad 1s. So maybe there's 8 to 10 quad 1 opportunities. And if you go 8-2 in those, pretty damn good for a 1 seed, or even 6-4. So 1 or 2 seed is where I think they'll end up, and it's more likely they'll be a 2 or a 3 just based off of the Big East metrics. But what I'll say is the ACC is ranked below us, and no one wants to talk about that except for when the SEC just destroys them in the ACC-SEC challenge. So anyway, that's here nor there. When we come back, we're going to talk about the AP poll and finish up this silly media narrative so we can move forward and get back to talking about Gonzaga tomorrow. We'll talk about that coming up. Nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. It's guaranteed perfection in every single bite. And right now you can save an unforgettable gifts with 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, score an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. With 5 generations of experience that consistently delivers the world's best steak experience, the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages featuring its gourmet favorites. From legendary steaks to mouth-watering desserts, to save 50% off site-wide for a limited time at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners get an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. That's 50% off omahasteaks.com, an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. Minimum purchase may apply. All right, back on Locked On UConn. Last segment of the program. For once, I'm going to agree with the AP. I think the poll is paying attention. honestly, it's kind of refreshing. I think let's talk bigger picture here, because it makes me laugh how pundits love to cherry pick the metrics and the formula when it fits their narrative. Yet when the AP poll drops and UConn stays in the top 25 and then they get these wins, people kind of, and we know who I'm talking about, say that UConn shouldn't be there. The AP poll, at best, a temperature check. But right now, I feel like the thermometer is, there's no fever. It's kind of reading pretty accurately for UConn. After 2 big wins, returning to the continental U.S., UConn jumps to number 18. I think it's a fair spot. Absolutely. They lost 3 games in Maui. We all know this. It plummeted them all the way to the end of the rankings at the 25th spot. They routed Maryland Eastern Shores, whatever. But it was the gut-out win against Baylor that I thought was the catalyst. I love the Texas win because Alex was back, but to beat a top 15 team in Baylor, and yes, I know that I'm probably one of the only people in UConn, the UConn world that covers them, that brought up Jeremy Roach got a concussion and no VJ Edgecombe. So yes, did we 100% dodge a bullet there? Yes, but sometimes when you're putting together win streaks and putting together seasons, you have to get lucky from time to time. And that to me was a lucky situation for them. Unfortunate for Baylor. But there was no luck involved with Texas. We dominated them from start to finish. And Texas 7-1. Yes. Do they have any big wins? No. But as far as rankings concerned, top 30 in KenPom, top 40 in EvanMiya before that game, and NBA talent with Trey Johnson, Arthur Kaluma, and others that I felt like were going to make a difference, but it didn't matter. UConn just played better. So I think the absurdity of the broader AP poll landscape is that I like the Tennessee as number 1. I think Auburn holds steady at 2, despite losing at Duke, which somehow moved up to 4, which I agree and disagree with. I think Duke is really good. You can't. I hate it. I hate saying it, but Duke is going to be in barring some monumental injury. Knock on wood. I don't want to see anyone get hurt. Barring some monumental collapse of their coaching staff, which is more likely, Duke's going to be a Final Four team. College basketball, for all its faults, will always cater to Duke in the respect of, from a media perspective, they're always going to get the best slots in games because they move the needle for 2 reasons. And we're getting there because people hate us now too. People hate Duke and people love Duke. There's no in between. No one's kind of like, I don't really care. You have an opinion about Duke. UConn is getting to that level where you have an opinion. And I think Dan loves that because it just shows that we're not just the really talented, plucky underdog that, beat Duke in 1999 and then, hung around and had another title in 2004, beating Duke in the semis. And then, a couple of Cinderella runs in 2011, 2014. No, this team dominated the field in 23 at the end of the year and then all last year. So we're close to that. And I will be the first to admit that we don't move the needle as much as Duke does, but only because for the same reason that, a stupid Jake Paul fight gets 35 or 60 million people to watch it because you don't like him and you wanted to see him get his head knocked off, even as unlikely as it is. And maybe even if you think it's scripted, like I think most people do. So anyway, I think the shakeups sometimes are entertaining, but I think Gonzaga's a top 10 team still. Iowa State's really good. Marquette's right there. Again, these AP rankings, again, are a snapshot. I think where UConn is ranked right now, 18th, is very appropriate. And then now we get a top 10 matchup against Gonzaga, and I think we can win that game. They're beatable. We match up with them size-wise really well. And I think the Madison Square Garden advantage is going to validate UConn's resurgence. You're going to hear a lot of UConn, UConn chants all through the Garden. And I think it's going to be a close game for once against Gonzaga because I think we have dominated them for quite some time. But I think this one's going to be a lot closer. They're a contender, though. So we got to stay locked on and really make sure that those toughness meters are rising because I don't think that team is going to go anywhere. I don't think they're going to back down from us. But I'm excited for Liam McNeely's first game at Madison Square Garden. Hopefully Jay Stu can rekindle some of that Big East final magic. And I think we're going to be a tough out this weekend. We're going to talk about this game a lot more. I'm going to see if I can get a crossover episode with our Locked On Zags host sometime this week. But until then, this has been another episode of Locked On UConn. I'm your host, Mark Zanetto, asking you to stay locked on, stay connected, make sure those toughness meters are rising. And as always, go Huskies.